Hello there, my name's Michael Darby. I'm with Element Materials Technology, Technical Director in our Connected Technologies division. I want to talk to you today very briefly about the concept of testing for the USA and then reusing your test results for a new product, whether it's called data reuse or data referencing or just saving time. I want to go through some examples and some situations just to try and clarify. So the very basic concept for the USA, similar to how it is with Canada and other regions, is you must test a product for it to be authorised. I'm a European, so I'm used to CE marking, where you've got some sort of assessment or judgment where manufacturers may make some choice. But for the USA, you have to test the product, and that's that. The procedures and the process says so. So if you've got a product and you test it and then you make some sort of hardware modification to it, you retest that product. But you may not fully retest it, you may just test the things that have changed. So from a certain perspective, you could argue that you've tested both products, but some of the measurements are inherited from the original onto the second if you decide that those things didn't change. Now, if you've got a product which is subject to SDOC only, such as an electronics device, and you make a change, you're going to retest it. If you've got a product which also has a radio transmitter in it and it's certified, and you make some change to that, then the difference between certification and SDOC is you've still got to retest, and it just depends whether anyone's checking your homework. So if you've got a product which is certified and you make some change to some other hardware, you'll retest all those things that could have changed, but you'll accept the test results of the things that didn't change for the new model. So you could say that that's some sort of data reuse or test results referencing. One thing you can't do is say, okay, I've got my product, I've fully tested it as a radio and electronics thing. Now I've got a different product, but my design of my radio from my original product is the same as the design of my radio in my new product. The bottom right-hand corner of the circuit board is the transmitter. It's laid out the same. It's a new certification, but I used the same concept. That would be called a reference design certification. It's not permitted. So you can't just say the two products are very similar, so I'll inherit the same results. That doesn't work. But one thing that happened a few years ago was that the FCC identified situations, let's say particularly with fully complex smartphones. So you've got a smartphone. It might have multiple bands of 2G, 3G, 4G, even 5G cellular technology. That's a lot of measurements all out of the antenna conducted port. Plus Wi-Fi at multiple frequency bands, Bluetooth, RFID. Some of the testing will have been radiated. Some of the testing will have been RF exposure like SAR. Some of the testing would have been just measured from the antenna port. Now, let's say you made a minor hardware variation to one of the transmitter parts. Let's say you removed one of the 4G LTE bands, or maybe you removed the NFC RFID. You've made a change to the transmitter, so it needs a new certification. New certifications need new testing. But that's a lot of antenna port testing, and so the FCC introduced this concept of a data reuse or data referencing process through one of their knowledge database documents known as a KDB. So therefore they were allowing a fully populated device like a smartphone that gets depopulated through one of its frequency bands to have a new certification referencing some of the old test data. So of course you would have to repeat all the radiated test cases and the RF exposure test cases, but the conducted antenna port test cases you could bring over from the original. So now suddenly for the first time you're certifying a new product based on some results of the old product. Over the years this kind of evolved a little bit, and it got recently to the FCC expanding that KDB to say, right, well, we'll allow a little bit more creativity in the types of variation between products. But you need to come to us with a pre-approval guidance. So again, a KDB inquiry to the FCC for each project. Well, we've seen a few changes here in 2025, especially to the FCC and other federal government agencies. and they're trying to look at how much time and work they're spending on activities such as replying to KDBs. In addition, some manufacturers are getting really quite creative with how much variation and change between models where they still wanted to adopt different test data and test results. So in April 2025, the FCC changed their requirements again and said, no, look, we're going to go back to the situation where the only data referencing that can apply is you've got a fully populated radio device, you depopulate one of the transmitters, and then you're accepting all the conducted test results. No other changes are permitted, no other hardware changes. You're not allowed to change screens, connectors, memory chips, things like that. Some manufacturers had got used to being allowed more changes and they're a little bit upset by that, but the reality is it's still a relaxation, it's still an allowance from the original, because the real original would have been full testing on every product. So in summary then, if you've got a product and you're making a small change and it was a certified product like a radio transmitter, that's a permissive change. If you've got two products that are identical except for one transmitter band depopulation, you could use the data referencing. If you wanted to depopulate it by removing a transmitter and do some other changes, that's outside of the scope of the new depopulation data reference KDB. So you can't just automatically do that. One solution, of course, would be to do a new certification based on the idea of identical products, and then do the permissive change to allow the change to connectors or screen or memory card or whatever. What the FCC are not in the business of is reviewing test reduction test plans. So simply saying to the FCC, it's not written anywhere in your KDB or your guidance, but I've got this, this and this, and I don't want to do all the testing. Please, will you let me do this instead? They're most likely, in our experience, going to just come back to you and say, does it fit within the KDB or not? And in most cases, therefore not. So they say, well then, please follow the KDBs and follow the procedures. So anyway, that's a brief overview of when data can be used from one model to another. I hope it's been helpful. Reach out to your local Element office if you have any questions, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.